Okay, good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee on Monday the 23rd of March. I'm Councillor Alison Jay, Councillor for Highwards Ward and Chair of this committee. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Ronald Street. This meeting is being held in the Grand Jury Room in the Town Hall in Colchester and is also being broadcast live over the internet, where it can be watched via the Council's YouTube channel, where the recording will be available to view afterwards. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room if required. We will have a short break at 7:30 this evening. I will now ask members of the committee and attending officers to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good evening, Richard Block, Chief Operating Officer.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Dave Harris, Beerchurch Ward.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Natalie Summers, St Anne's St John's Ward.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward, substituting for Councillor William Sykes.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Sarah Naylor, Lexton and Braithwaite Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Hussein Alanese, 24-25 Chief Accountant.
Evening all. Councillor Chris Pearson, Portfolio Holder for Economic Growth, etc.
Good evening, members. Anna D'Alessandro, Interim Chief Finance Officer in Section 151.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor David King, Leader of the Council, and a couple of etceteras.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, thank you. Substitutions. Councillor Rowe, as he mentions, is substituting for Councillor Sykes tonight. Urgent items. The Chair will announce if there's any item not on the published agenda which will be considered. We're not aware of any urgent items tonight, so we can move on. Item 4, declarations of interest. Councillors are asked to say if there are any items on the agenda about which they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or any other registrable interest or non-registrable interest which would prevent them from participating in any discussion of the item or participating in any vote upon the item. Do I have any declarations? Okay, moving on. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. There's no minutes for approval at this particular meeting. And item 6, we've had no registrations for Have Your Say. So we can move on to call business. Item 7.1, which is the final statement of accounts for 24-25 and the draft audit plan 25-26. We're actually going to start with an overview by Richard Block, just to give us an introduction to where we've been and where we're moving towards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Thought it'd be prudent to just say a few words about the item, in that it looks back to 24-25, which is obviously a period quite a while ago, and we've come on quite a journey over the last couple of years that this committee's been very close and instrumental in. So just in terms of history, a year and a half prior to the 24-25 accounts, we entered into a shared service arrangement with partner councils in Essex to deliver our financial services team, and we were pushed into that really by the difficulties in the recruitment market around qualified technical and senior finance staff, and those difficulties still prevail, I have to say. I'll cover that a little bit more later. That shared service obviously resulted in several concerns, particularly that this committee recognised and that latterly were taken on and addressed, bringing us up to the current state of play today. The first stage of responding to those concerns was obviously bringing Anna in as our interim Chief Finance Officer, Section 151 Officer, And I hope tonight, when we hear from KPMG, we'll hear how that journey's going with Anna's leadership and the work she's done to actually build back assurance from this committee and really kind of bring the service where it needs to be. I would like to recognise the role that this committee's played. Obviously, you were expressing concerns regarding the previous arrangements consistently, and those concerns were heard, and we bring ourselves up to this current position. I mean, Anna can talk more, and perhaps KPMG can, about where we're at now, but we are significantly progressed from where we were in terms of the actual kind of skill level and resource that we have in our finance service. We're on a process of converting many of the interim roles now to permanent. Well, I think we've converted 4 of 6 at the last reckoning, but I will make no bones, it's still a challenging environment. At the local councils network conference last week, Sit for Penna spoke about the challenges in finance staff recruitment, estate staff recruitment and digital, which are accentuated by local government reorganisation. So it's not an easy market. We are making significant progress in terms of actually bringing things to where we are. That's all I really wanted to say, and I'll hand over to Anna, who's going to take you through the actual substance of the item.
Okay, thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Richard, and completely concur and agree. Having been in this for a very long time, but also having grappled with having to recruit interims and recruit permanent people. I don't want to dwell on the past, but because what I want to do is focus moving forward. We can't change the past, we can only learn from the past, and we can just improve it moving forward. But in terms of some context, I just wanted to give you a few points, and I do not wish to sound defensive, and I apologise if it comes across that way, because that's not the intention. It's my passion that comes through, I'm afraid. But just to remind the committee members of where we were, so we are talking about 24-25. That's retrospective. That's now almost 2 financial years ago, because we're moving as of next week into 26-27. The last set of accounts was not audited since 2019-20. So there's 4 years of disclaimed accounts, and with all the will in the world and the extraordinary skill of the man sitting at the end of this table, who has a huge amount of skill and experience, and I know because I used to work with him, there is no way in the world there would be enough resources on our side or KPMG side to be able to fix all the problems of 4 years in one. We have made huge leaps and bounds, but we know that there's room for improvement. So I wanted to start by saying we've accepted all the recommendations that KPMG has put forward. I'm most embarrassed about the one about disclosure of about the support for the journals, because for me things like journals and working papers are very, very fundamental, and if you can't get those right, then you've got to rethink what you're doing. So we've already started to address those, and Bernard, our interim chief accountant for 25-26, is sitting in the audience and has already started to pull together some work in terms of improving that. But we are now in we're in 26-27, so a lot of 25-26 is already gone. But we are working as best we can to improve. As I said previously, I and my team didn't come in until 25-26, so all we could do was influence 25-26. Because we've been playing catch up, next year we will catch up, so 25-26 will be a different situation. We did inherit a very challenging position with 23-24, and I will make no bones about how challenging that was. So a lot of the issues that we inherited, we had to deal with and start to fix. There are hundreds of pages in front of you in terms of all the reports that KPMG have put forward, but I'd like to synthesise the 2 main issues were around valuations, both of our assets and our pension fund, and both of those were inherited by the time that Hussein started with us in April 2025 last year. So there was no room to influence a lot of those 2 main issues. Just a couple of points. In the report, I see that it talks about the fact that we missed the deadline for the draft accounts. And I just wanted to put some context around that. Because of the Herculean effort that was required to get us from no accounts to 24-25 accounts, we weren't sure we were going to hit the 30th of June deadline, if I'm perfectly honest. And what I don't want to do, and I've never done, is want to put meetings in the diary and keep cancelling them because it doesn't look good. By the time we got to the point of realising that we could hit the 30th of June deadline, it was impossible to constitute an audit committee in time for the 30th of June. So I made the decision that we were going to miss the deadline anyway, so we might as well have gone to the July meeting rather than put in another notional audit committee meeting. And that doesn't come across in the report, but that is entirely true, and that's why we went to the July committee meeting, not because the accounts weren't ready. And the same for the publication date for these final accounts. The accounts for 24-25 were ready in time, and it was nothing to do with the fact that the accounts weren't ready as we missed the backstop date. It's around the value for money conclusion. And finally, and Emma won't be surprised by me saying this because I said this to her as well, but I am rather disappointed at how negative the reports have come across. Again, I need to remind myself there were about 24-25, and of course I would like it to be much more positive about 25-26. I know that in the private meetings I have with Emma, it is positive, and we can see the progress that we've made from where we were and the effort that was required, given we had 4 years of no accounts to where we are now. It's not perfect by any means, and it probably won't be perfect for a few years to come, but we have made huge amounts of progress, and I wish that it was reflected much more so in the report. That's enough about history. So moving forward, we've already started to do a lot of work with KPMG. We've had a meeting today about what we were going to do about starting to build back assurance leading up to LGR. And there's already a plan in place that our audit manager has discussed with Bernard, our interim chief accountant. We will bring to the committee on a quarterly basis an update on where we are with recommendations from KPMG from tonight, so you can see the progress we're making and building in a lot of the work that KPMG have recommended for us to do in the 25-26 accounts wherever possible. So we are planning to, and all work will be happening to get us to a draft set of accounts for the meeting on the 24th of June, which will be within the legislative requirement of the 30th of June to bring the 25-26 draft accounts. So we are accepting what's happened, and we are working very hard to improve upon that for 25-26. That's all I want to say, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there, I mean, we've obviously got two issues here. We've got the accounts that we're being asked to approve and the audit plan that we're asked to note. Is there anything on the accounts in particular that people want to raise at this point? Yes, Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for the presentation. Firstly, just referring back to the comments made by Mr. Block, I'm pleased that there's some acknowledgement of the concerns that this committee raised, because if we're being absolutely honest, this committee, and in particular some members of it, raised concerns quite early on, and there was a period of time where we were effectively told, being blunt, everything's fine, stop asking awkward questions. And the simple reality is this committee turned out to be right. And I don't want to go over old ground, but you know, I'm pleased that there's been an acknowledgement of that. I think it's long overdue because those concerns turned out to be perfectly warranted. Moving on, and let's be clear, I totally accept that this is 24-25. There are just a few questions I've got round it. Anna mentioned our Section 151 officer mentioned the journals. I just wonder if perhaps you could just go through some of the processes which have now been put in place in terms of ensuring that we don't end up with undocumented journals again. I don't know when these happened, obviously in 24-25, so some time ago. There's probably, in all likelihood, a lot of the people who were here then when that occurred probably are no longer here, as probably 2 or 3 people down the line in some cases. But it would just be good for the committee to have some assurance as to what process has been put in place. As regards the backstop date, now obviously we had originally got this committee scheduled, I think, for the end of February, where we hoped to meet the March 31st backstop. And it was explained to us, which I'm quite prepared to accept, that the delay was relating to the Turnstone report. Now, as I understand it, there have effectively been 2 Turnstone sort of investigations going on, because KPMG have been doing your own investigation. I spent an hour with Hannah on it, and then there's been the tier one as well, which, as I understand it, have been sort of 2 separate processes. So I'd be interested to know what the relationship, as far as the accounts are concerned, and the audit, well, not the audit report, not the correct term, the report, we'll call it, what the relationship between those 2 reports is, and which elements depend on what. In our documents, we've still got gaps. So, for example, on page 200, we've got pending Turnstone completion in square brackets, which clearly there's going to be some text inserted in there. That's the documents we've got. So, obviously, if we're being asked to approve something, then we need to know what the final text is, because it's clearly still in draft format, as has been given to us in the agenda pack. The tier report, which I know we've now seen, and I don't want to dwell on that because I suspect that will come back to us, is in draft format. I'll be absolutely honest, having scanned through it, I'm going to be brutally frank here, it is very poor, in my opinion. It gets a number of fundamental facts wrong about the nature of the Turnstone deal. I cannot believe that for the report they have interviewed only 3 people, 2 of whom were not members of staff when the vast majority of this happened. How you can actually get put together a report on that basis, I have no idea. So I hope as a council, when we review it, we go back with some fairly firm things. They've just got facts wrong. They've got numbers wrong. They've got facts wrong in it. And I'm not saying that to defend myself, because actually there's a few things in there which I think won't help any of us, but you know, if they're corrected. So I just would be interested to know, on the report we've got in front of us, how much of it relies on the tier and how much of it relies on KPMG's own internal work.
To take that question first, because you had 2 parts there, Paul, and Emma, if you want to take the second part.
Well, if I just come back, I think it's worth just noting what's driven why we're here today versus why we were not here last month. So you have 2. I'm looking at 2 aspects of when I look at the audit. So I have the financial statements position, and I also have to issue a value for money position. The only thing that has delayed the sign of the accounts is linked to the value for money. And actually, within the NEO guidelines, you are exempt from the backstop date if I have been unable to conclude on my value for money. So you haven't missed the backstop date. We have been unable to meet the backstop because I haven't been able to conclude my value for money as at the 27th of February. The reason for that is, as you say, so one of the things that I've looked at a lot this year is linked to Turnstone. And the trigger for that within value for money was obviously when we looked at the accounts, we had a very big difference in that first set of accounts between we had a valuation of nothing versus a large liability. So that triggered let's have a look at what's happened in terms of the decision making to get us to this point. So we, as part of our value for money work, have gone back through and understood that transaction to make sure that we understood how that had happened, looked at the governance over it, and we have given it, and I think, you know, a thorough look at, more than actually probably, you know, some may say value for money is looking at the arrangements in place during 24-25. We've gone back further than that because I wanted to make sure I understood fully the transaction and was able to look at that. Now, one of the things that I was aware of very quickly as we started going into the discussions around value for money was that the council had already commissioned a report by tier to look at the governance arrangements around Turnstone. Now, clearly, when I issue my value for money report, I have to make sure I have considered lots of factors. And one of the things I have to consider is, are there any other areas of assurance that I should consider as part of my conclusion? I was aware that there was an internal audit report over something that clearly was quite significant. I'd got a value for money risk over it. So therefore I needed to look at that to say, was there anything in there that could have caused me a concern beyond which I had already thought about or looked at, which could have had a bearing on the value for money opinion. So when I had access to the draft report, I considered that there was nothing in there that was particularly out of line with my own considerations, which is why it is not, if you look at my reporting within the value for money, it acknowledges the fact that that report is happening and that we will consider the findings of that report during our 25-26 valuation. So that one little comment on the front of that report should just refer through to the fact that on the subsequent pages we have now completed that work, so we will get that updated for the final annual audit report. So they are linked in that I wanted to look at that report as a key part to make sure that there was nothing out of line, and that is very similar. So if you'd had a regulatory inspection which had come right at the end of February, I would want to see and consider that report as for other aspects of value for money. So it wasn't that I thought that there was an issue in that report, I just wanted to conclude that there wasn't an issue in there.
Okay, thank you. Paul, are you looking for some feedback on the question about the journal process?
Yeah, it was just really what processes we now put in
Yeah.
place to overcome that risk.
So I think we've got Bernard here who can answer that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, we did, when I first came, we did have a problem with journals. I think one of the main problems that we had was the fact that individuals could actually input a journal and then post it. So really, there was one process where one person could do it. Now, I've put a procedure into place right now where every journal that nobody can just input it, it has to be approved. So it will go through to approval, and the approver will make sure that there's all the evidence that's been applied to it. I've written the procedure, and it's ongoing. And to kind of buttress that, what I've done is I've a weekly review. I'm going to do a weekly review of the journals, sample some journals to make sure that there's evidence and everything. The other thing is, right, what we are doing is we're trying to review some of the journals prior to me coming. So especially with the capital ones, because they're very high level journals. So we're reviewing all those journals to make sure that there's evidence applied, because you can actually apply evidence with an attack. And but what we are going to do is that as soon as the closure process is over, we're going to put a systems stop in there. So basically, we'll have two groups of people. We'll have the approvers, and then we'll have the inputters. And then basically, the system will force you to actually approve somebody else to approve the journal. So you won't be able to input and approve at the same time. Well, you can't do it now because it will just take too much time. We've just got to do the closure at the moment. So we've just put an interim process into place. That's for the journals.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask as well, there was a mention of understating of accruals at year end. I mean, again, is that just a matter of a change of process? Is it a problem?
I think in terms of the accruals for the 25-26 process, we've actually set out instructions, clear instructions, and that also will review it on an ongoing basis, on a weekly basis. So I've got some person in my team that will review the accruals and making sure that they're right. I've defined the accruals as well. So I've sent instructions out to what their accruals are and the processes which we go and record it, and make sure that there are links to all the forms that we send in, so that we can kind of check the evidence, the actual calculations we've been. So hopefully there'll be far more robust list of accruals that people can kind of highlight. So those are the kind of things that we kind of put into place. Okay,
thank you.
Just you do have my sympathy, because trying to work out somebody else's undocumented journal is not a pleasant
Well,
thing.
we've got a list of all the users. So if they're not here, that's.
I was going to say they're probably not here.
But if they are here, we will kind of track them. I mean, we can't do all of it, but we'll sample some of the big transactions.
Give assurance. That's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Rowe, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It wasn't really, sort of, I suppose it is a question as well, but it's initially around the framing of the whole meeting that we had from sort of Section 151 officer. I think it sort of sounds as if this is a new administration, as if the administration has picked up some mess left by somebody else. In case I've missed something in Colchester, this administration and the leader has been in place for a rather long period of time. And I sort of reject the idea that that this is a new issue and this is something completely out of the blue. I fully understand that there are new officers in place, and I think we should very much state at the very beginning, I don't think anyone is stating that the officers are to blame or the officers have any issues or problems with it. However, I do think when we are asking questions that they are directed primarily at the administration, who has overseen this for a very long time. And as Councillor Dundas pointed out right at the beginning, it's not as if these concerns haven't been voiced in the past. They have, and I think that they've been dismissed. So just from a framing perspective, I think that's important to just put it out there so that anybody listening at home is aware of exactly where we stand. And also, for those of us who aren't necessarily sort of sort of as financially astute, I suppose, missing the statutory deadline. I suppose a point to you, I suppose, in the first KPMG, but how could you sort of break down how serious or how important is that in this particular case or in any particular case? Could you just give us a brief overview of sort of what that exactly means? Thank you.
Councillor Rowe, I mean, Emma did actually make it quite clear that we hadn't missed the statutory stop date, but Emma, if you want to just clarify again.
Yeah, so I think you have 2 dates to which you are required to act to. So one is the date for the submission of the draft accounts. So as Anna explained, that one wasn't hit this year, but that was for, the accounts were prepared in time, but because of the requirement to take it to an audit committee, which wasn't scheduled in line to meet that backstop date, that missed that one. And the year-end one, as I have just explained, because I hadn't been able to conclude my value for money because of the delay in getting the internal audit report, you are exempt from that backstop date as at end of February. I think what is important to remember is that last year for 23-24, this council was about 10 months late missing the deadline. So I think, again, reflecting on the journey that has happened here to effectively have a set of accounts which were prepared on time, we were just waiting for governance to catch up, is a huge improvement, and I am very confident that the date will be hit for this year based on what I've seen so far.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think in terms of the reframing as well, we've had an answer to that in terms of we've accepted the recommendations of the report, but Councillor King, if you want to add something to that.
No, I always welcome a challenge from Councillor Rowe because it's fair. It's fair to acknowledge that the political leadership has that responsibility, and what happens on our watch or happens on my watch, and we are accountable for. And that's one of the reasons I come so often to enjoy governance and audit, because of the importance of the work that you do, and because I take it, as you would expect I should, as leader of the council, really seriously. But there is a context, and I know that you understand that, which is that accounting companies across the country have had their struggles, and we won't talk about predecessors, but I think the distinction I heard our Section 151 make was personal, as in the new team of officers helping to get this council's accounts to a much better place has felt personal, has been personal, has been taken on as a real significant challenge, and that's the kind of flavour that I've had, and I hear the huge improvement acknowledged by Emma, and I think that's the way we have to look at this. It's not so much where we were, but it's where we are and where we're going. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nay.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to check my understanding of something, if I may. So we've not missed the backstop this time because you haven't been able to, KPMG hasn't been able to complete its value for money by 28th of February, is that correct? But the reason you weren't able to complete your value for money is because you didn't get an internal review that this council's responsible for providing to you. Is that correct?
So I needed to see the draft accounts, the draft report, which wasn't ready to be provided to me until the end of February, which is obviously being delivered by another provider.
Sorry, just checking though. So it was something that you were waiting for from this council that meant you couldn't complete your work on schedule?
Yes, the draft report wasn't prepared on time.
Thank you. Chairman, I think we need to take that point on board. So I think the idea that we haven't missed a backstop because we didn't produce something in time for the auditors to do their work is something we should note.
Richard.
I just wanted to provide some clarity regarding the internal audit report. That was commissioned, and I think I've said to this committee that it was going to be commissioned independent of the external audit and accounts, independent of that process. Now, it happens that KPMG wanted to see the draft report before finalising their external audit opinion around value for money. The two weren't linked in their commissioning. That report and that review was commissioned completely independently of that process, just to provide the reassurance to the committee.
Yeah, Councillor Dunn.
Thanks. Yeah, just to pick up on the backstop, just why I think there's some confusion around it is that I think when the meeting was councilled at the end of February, in fact, looking through the email trail, there's actually a question from you, Chair, asking about the consequences around the backstop, and we did not get any answers. So if there's some confusion about, obviously, whether it was the fact that because it's the value for money which was holding it up, in fact, actually, there's an email from Councillor Sunnox here saying, well, the financial statements are complete. Does that mean that we've completed the financial statements? He didn't get an answer. So that's why I think there's a bit of confusion from the committee as to whether we missed the backstop or not, because we were rather told that we had, but I'm actually quite pleased to hear that because it was the value for money holding it up. Just to pick up also on something the Section 151 officer said, I would agree, I must admit, in terms of the actual report. When I read the disclaimer, I thought, oh, that's quite brutal. It is quite a brutal disclaimed opinion. It's probably when the agenda pack came through and I read it, I must admit it was the language was a lot sharper than perhaps I was expecting, but that's fine. It is, but we have to acknowledge that, and there's no point in us complaining about it. We just have to say, well, that's it. That's what our auditor has said. But I think that has to be acknowledged. We have to acknowledge that it is quite a brutal, sobering wording that we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. So just to follow up on that question with regards to the report. Sorry, is it Emma? Sorry, Emma, apologies. I think I called you KPMG last time. I do apologise. So when you requested the report, do you feel that you gave reasonable time for the report to be created, or do you sort of accept that the council had a short period of time to create that report and provide it back to you?
I think, again, we just need to be clear, this wasn't the council drafting this report. This was the internal auditors producing this report. So as we've just heard, that was not commissioned for me. I didn't ask for that report to be delivered for me. It's an independent internal report prepared by the council. I knew that was happening, and it was an important part of my value for money conclusion. As I said, it would be the case if it was any other regulator, inspector, where you had this report come at that time. I would say if it could potentially have a bearing on my value for money report, I would need it to look at it. So I didn't ask for it to be prepared at a particular time. I asked to see it when it was ready. We were initially expecting it to be ready in January. because the council quite rightly need to go through a process of checking that the report is factually accurate, etc., that delayed that report. The report was given to me in February, but I need time to process and review that report. So if I had, well, it would not have been appropriate for me. I wouldn't have been able to have enough time to consider it to meet the backstop date. Therefore, this was the appropriate decision. Arguably, we could have had this audit committee the first or second week in March, and we could have been a little bit earlier. We've scheduled it for today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Just fully understand, just trying to understand the sequencing of events. So in that instance then, the report wasn't requested by the external auditor and was supposed to be drafted and put together by the internal auditor and then reviewed by Colchester. Where exactly was the delay in that process? Is it Colchester that was the delay, or is it the internal auditor who didn't provide us that report in time?
No, I don't think there was any date, was there? I think it was just that once MA was aware that that report was available, that you asked for time. So there wasn't a delay, it was asked for time to consider a report that was valuable to the value for money. We could have had, presumably, if that report hadn't been available, but it would reflected that work, would it? So it was important to wait, is my opinion.
Sorry, no, I don't understand. So the report was available, but we didn't provide it to KPMG until they asked, or it was, so it was available, or it wasn't available.
It wasn't available, but it wasn't necessary.
You know, I understand that, but if it's not available, and the external auditor is saying it's a document that she would expect to be created by a council, so I'm trying to understand why would the document not be there? No?
If I can. So internal audit is a completely separate function to external audit. So internal audit have a remit to provide assurance to the council. They have a standard of work that is completed each year, but also they are available to provide additional assurance. The council asked for a separate piece of work to be done in terms of turnstone governance. That was commissioned and completed, that was a separate piece of work to be completed. If that had started today, I wouldn't have waited to look at that. That report was finalising at the time I was reaching my conclusion of value for money. And therefore, at that point, I say, right, well, there is a report in draft that is due to be, and as I say, my expectation initially was that was going to be ready in January, and it didn't quite get there, as is a normal process for finalisation of reports. So I wanted them to look at it because it could have had a bearing on my opinion. So that is the only, so at that point I made the decision that I wanted to see that report in case it changed my value for money conclusion. The council, I know me and Richard had many conversations about getting that report and finalised it, but reasonably so, it needs to be in a condition that is felt sensible to share to me. So there's only, if I saw a very, very draft report with no number of errors in it, that would not have given me any assurance. So it needs to come through at the appropriate time. That landed, I need to consider it, and that's what's happened.
Councillor Pearson, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I just thought, very briefly, I'll go through a history of where we're at and how we got here. Because apart from the year when the Conservative administration controlled the council, I think I've chaired this committee until this last year for about half a dozen years or more. And we know that there were issues with getting the external audit done on time going back to 2019. What I will say is that the current committee makeup, the majority of the current committee makeup, were extremely good over the last 3 to 4 years in challenging the finance officers, our external auditors when we could interact with them, to get to a position where we had a clearer picture of what was happening with our finances. We've gone through 3 Section 151 officers in that time. And I think, I don't want to put words into Emma's mouth, but I think basically we've had a new auditing firm come in. KPMG want to be absolutely certain that what they are auditing, what they are being informed is as accurate as it possibly can be. So they're asking for information, if they know that information is going to be available where previously it wasn't available, and that seems to be the case with this report, Councillor Rowe, that the council was asking its internal auditors to do a report. KPMG, knowing that that report was being prepared, have taken the view that that would be helpful in coming to their view about value for money. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and ultimately the council, the 51 members of the council, want to be assured of is that the external auditors are comfortable and happy with the direction of travel when it comes to the financial management of Colchester City Council. And I think that makes sense for all of us. And I would just like to say, put on record tonight that all members of the committee, regardless of party, have been extremely astute and have almost been a dog with a bone at times in challenging the officers of the council to provide us, and when I say us, I'm talking about the committee membership now, provide us with the information that we want, and we've always wanted to be assured that the finances of the council are in a sound position. Based on what I've heard over the last few years from all of those challenges, I'm pretty convinced that they are, but we just need to have that external audit position. We hear from, the committee gets regular reports from the internal auditors as well, so everyone around the table will be familiar with TIA's reports. They're different to the external auditors' reports, I think it's fair to say, and they're not around the financial veracity of the council. They're more about how everything else is operating throughout the council, not just the finances.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Dundas.
Thanks, and I think the explanation of the report, the relationship to tier report, I'm happy with that. I'm sure we will look at the tier report in itself. I mean, I was very rude about it earlier. Page 1, factual statement: the income strip lease requires the City Council to pass on 70% of the rent collected from the occupational tenants to Canada Life. Factually incorrect. The whole thing is riddled with factually monetary incorrect statements. I could tear this apart for hours. We need to take a very serious look at this because they do not understand the financials of the Turnstone deal at all in this report.
But it will be coming back to us. I mean, in terms of tonight's business, it's about the governance, I think, of the statement of accounts and the audit report. I think we've had a good workshop beforehand on the finances. We're comfortable with those. We've looked at the audit plan and the recommendations, and that we're going to get regular feedback on where we are with the recommendations. Are members here tonight happy to approve the statement of accounts and the statements that go with it, and note and agree the audit plans? Okay, we're happy to move on. Okay, thank you very much everybody for your time. That's really helpful.
Sorry, I'm not sure that I'm happy to just follow it through.
Well, I'm not nodding it through. What are you asking now? I mean, I've given opportunity for questions. You've
Yeah,
had your
no, I
questions
understand,
answered.
but I'm still not, I don't know, I still don't feel comfortable with just pushing it through.
I mean, what further do you want, or what would you like noted? But I think at this stage, we've been through the finances, we've been through the audit recommendations, we accept where we are.
Well, does it make a difference if I vote against, because I'm obviously outvoted
Yeah,
anyway?
no, that can be noted if you vote against.
So I think I'd rather just be noted that I vote against
Okay.
it, rather than just continuing it.
If I ask all those in favour. Recommendation, yeah. All in agreement? Okay, those abstaining? And any voting against? Noted, thank you very much.
Fair enough. Sorry.
Okay, if we move on to item 7.2, the interim review of the annual governance statement under the 24-25 action plan. Hayley McGrath, I think, do you want to move forward for this?
Thank you, Chair. So following on from the statement of accounts, it's appropriate to bring you the annual governance statement for 24-25. This was originally reviewed by yourselves back in June 25, when we brought to you the draft annual governance statement and an action plan for the current financial year to look at any of the issues that have been highlighted by the statement. When the statement is brought to you in June, it's on a provisional basis, subject to any amendments that are requested during the external audit process for the final statement of accounts. And obviously you've just had the report for the 24-25 accounts. There were issues highlighted there in the value for money report, but there were no changes requested to the annual governance statement as a result of any of the issues highlighted by the external auditors during their process. So the report sets out for you the action plan that highlighted the areas of improvement in our control arrangements for the 25-26 year. And you can see there were several items that we highlighted on that action plan. We actually had a total of 8, which is quite significant. There's quite a few more than we would normally have. And a fair amount of those were items that have been highlighted during that review by the external auditors. So I've undertaken a review with the officers concerned for those actions, and I've set out a position update for you. And I'm pleased to say that the items that were highlighted, either actions have been completed or will be in the process of being completed towards the end of this financial year or at the beginning of the very next financial year. So open to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, has anybody got anything? It doesn't look like it then, so I think we've considered and reviewed, so we can note the report. Thank you very much. Did you want to say something? No, you're all right. Sorry, Councillor Dundas.
Ever so briefly, just on the sorry, Hayley.
Make it worthwhile.
You mentioned on the anti-fraud and corruption process,
Yes.
is the business case for additional resources has been approved. Recruitment is currently taking place. Just for clarity, who or what are we recruiting?
What we're recruiting is a governance officer, primarily with a focus for anti-fraud and corruption. So that's going through the process at the moment. We're just having the graded. That will be out to advert very shortly. And I've just agreed the advert for a governance apprentice to support that role. And again, part of their job description is anti-fraud and corruption, to actually reinforce some of that work to give us a bit more of a robust and resilience within the team to look at those issues.
Okay, thank you. Are we happy to move on then? That's lovely, thank you very much. So we move on to item 7.3, which is a review of data protection policies. We have Laura Wheeler, our Information Services Manager, online. Laura, do you want to give us an overview when you're ready?
Yep, good evening. So the Data Protection Department was subjected to a audit review at the end of last year. And on the back of that, it was recommended that we put in place some new policies and just did our annual refresh of our existing data protection policy. So you'll see that we now have a subject access request policy, an FOI policy, and a data breach notification policy that I bring forward today. They were directed actions from the audit. That is something that it was felt that should be in place.
Okay, that's lovely. Has anyone got any specific questions? Yes, Councillor Pearson.
Not a question, just to say how impressed I was with what Laura's produced and put before you this evening. Part of my etc. is responsibility for digital, as you will all be aware. I went through this with a fine-tooth comb, and I have to admit that I only made one very minor request for an amendment. Laura has been absolutely fantastic in putting these three very detailed policies together, and I recommend them to you.
Okay, thank you. I thought they were really well stated, just from my point of view, maybe because I've missed it. Some of the policies seem to mention staff. Where was this widened to include councillors, and is those the policies we looked at previously? Yeah, okay. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, Councillor Dundas.
You slightly stole my question, Chair. For those of us who were at the G&A subcommittee last week, there was quite a lot of discussion about GDPR. And I think there was quite a lot of confusion about it as to how it relates to councillors these days. And I'm just wondering if maybe it's something in the new term after the elections, an update or refresh to councillors around GDPR and how to deal with data might be worth considering.
Yeah, Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on that. Our interim chief for digital services was going to put something together in April. I suggested that we left it until after the election. However, in consultation with the chief exec, we've gone back, and he will be putting something together in the next week or two.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yes, Richard.
Just to clarify, I think the rationale for bringing it forward, this wasn't just a, talking to members about data, but it was more about actually listening as well to some of the concerns that members have over the IT changes and finding ways that we could respond to those concerns. It was felt we couldn't wait for that in the new municipal year. It was too urgent.
Okay, so are we happy to agree the three new policies and their introduction into the governance framework? Okay, lovely. That's great. Thank you very much. If we move on to item 7.4, the Health and Safety Report 2025, and we've got Hayley McGrath again and Lee Holden, our Health and Safety Officer. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to do a brief introduction to the report, and then I'll hand over to Lee to give you a bit more detail about some of the work that's been undertaken. But it's appropriate that we bring you a review on an annual basis of our health and safety function, as it forms part of our risk management framework, and obviously that forms part of our policy framework. The ultimate responsibility for health and safety rests with the leader and with Cabinet, and therefore it's appropriate for this committee to review the report and to endorse the submission of the report following this evening to Cabinet for approval as the health and safety policy for 2026. So one of the key areas that we've actually been working on during the year in question, which is the calendar year for 2025, was looking at our health and safety framework overall across the organisation. We recognised that whilst we had a good health and safety framework, there were areas for improvement. So we actually commissioned an external report to do a review of our health and safety across the whole organisation. It's a very detailed report, and I haven't included with the report as an appendix because it's too long, and it's also very detailed, and obviously there's some sensitive data in there. However, I'm happy to provide you with a copy if you require it. It set out a review, as I say, across the whole organisation, both for people, for buildings, for our visitors, looking at all of the policies that are appropriate for health and safety. And it also set out an action plan for areas for improvement. And we looked at how we were operating at the start of the audit review and where we want to go to. So obviously there's different levels of health and safety, and it's understanding what standard we want to achieve. Obviously, we could go for a gold standard, which would be very expensive and also very detailed. But what we want to make sure is that we have a robust standard for health and safety that gives us appropriate controls in place. So I'm going to hand over to Lee, and he will give a bit of a run through of some of the work that we've undertaken during the year from a health and safety point of view.
Hi everyone. I don't want to repeat what Hayley just said. However, there was a focus to drive forward the recommendations from the review. aided by a refreshed Health and Safety Committee chaired by Richard Block. And the committee, Health and Safety Committee, have met twice now, meet quarterly, and it really does help improve the culture of health and safety throughout the council, and it helps me as well. As Hayley said, there was quite a few recommendations, but that is the gold standard. We're working through all the actions, and I do have some help from Rachel Marriott, who compiled the report as well. It's about 190 pages. Any questions so far? I'll move on to the action reporting system. It is up and running, the new action reporting system. It's got just probably about another 8 or 9 departments to go. Most of the services are now through, just some of the smaller services, smaller departments to complete. Over the last year, leisure services have been given a lot of support. We've been going through a transition. It's been given a lot of support by myself and others in regards to health and safety. Accidents, just over 1,000 the previous year, but that was a longer 15-month period. So accidents are probably slightly lower than they were the previous year. I'm happy to drill in some of the RIDDOR reports. Okay, we did have a asbestos exposure at the museum. That was dealt with very quickly, and there was 0 exposure to public and staff. There was an incident with a neighbourhood staff member where he was looking into investigating fly tips, opened up a black bag, and there was suspected asbestos in that bag. A procedure has now been put in place for that. A vehicle driven by the neighbourhood's team struck a e-scooter. However, we investigated that, and it was actually the e-scooter driver's fault, the rider's fault. There was a baby at Leisure World that rolled off a changing mat. Unfortunately, the straps that were meant to be on the baby change had been removed. I did report this to the HSC. The HSC did get in contact with me, and procedures have been put in place, and the items have been replaced as well. So we've got a new baby change as well. Run through the main ones. A member of the public was found deceased at Salary Brook. We have carried out a open water risk assessment, and actions have already started on that, mainly around signage. Customer at Leisure World, suspected heart attack while using the gym. And we had 2 incidents or 2 accidents in a meeting where 2 chairs that some staff were using folded, and some injuries sustained there. That is it for the RIDDORs. Is there any questions?
Yes, Councillor Dunn.
Thanks for that. I must admit, after my attempts at the last G&A meeting with hot chocolate, I'm viewing this in an entirely new light. But in all seriousness, firstly, you talk about across the whole organisation. Just for clarity, what is that encompassing? Is that encompassing CBH and particularly CCHL as well? I'm looking forward to the later item where CCHL are clearly taking on roles which perhaps have more of a health and safety risk around them, thinking of the grounds maintenance contract. So that's my first question. The hot weather continuity plan, I'd be just a little bit interested to know what that consists of. And question prompted actually by the seemingly rather active Charter Hall chairs. When we are letting out a council facility to an external events provider, and they are in effect running the entire organisation or event, whatever it is, and therefore the customers are not directly our customers, they are the customers of whoever we have let the venue out to, be it Castle Park or Charter Hall or Moot Hall. Who is ultimately responsible for health and safety there?
I will try and remember those three questions. So in terms of the coverage for health and safety, Lee covers CCHL as well, but not Colchester Borough Homes. Colchester Borough Homes have their own health and safety team due to the nature of the work that they undertake and the extensive nature of dealing with the properties, but we do cover CCHL, so we provide support to them. And obviously as part of the proposed new arrangements, I've already had a meeting about that today. We were doing some risk workshops in terms of what might happen if we went ahead with the grounds maintenance contract and looking at those areas. So we're already working on that. With hot weather business continuity plans, that's primarily for our members of staff that are based outside. So if you think about our waste collection services, it's how we operate when the weather exceeds a certain temperature. So that's making sure they're hydrated, they have suntan cream, they have opportunity for more breaks, they have somewhere shaded that they can go. So we have plans available in the event that we have to take that weather into consideration, which we did last year. Doesn't always happen, but last year we did. And in terms of equipment that's hired out, with the events that were referred to in here, they were actually internal events, so it was an internal council meeting where this occurred. However, the question you pose about ownership, it really does depend on what the incident is. So with any hire, the council and CCHL still maintain a responsibility, even hiring out Castle Park, for example, the summer series of concerts, that's handed over to an operator who will bring all of their equipment. Any equipment they bring into that site, any works that they do, they are responsible for, and we're very clear with that. However, as an owner of that property, we still have a vicarious liability for any issues that might occur due to the structure, the infrastructure of the park itself. So, for example, very, very basically, if somebody went along to a concert in the park in the summer and they trip in a pothole in the pavement, that actually remains our responsibility because it is the structure of the park. However, if they tripped over a trailing wire that the operator had put in, that would remain with the operator and not with us.
Okay, and in terms of clarification, sort of under health and safety, sort of inspection of play spaces, that sort of thing, does that come under this or?
So the inspection,
that's me.
That's okay. The inspection of play spaces all comes under our risk management process. It's not responsibility of the health and safety team, it's a service responsibility, and that's the difference with health and safety. The services are responsible for ensuring health and safety in their areas, which is why we have a committee that is formed of representatives from each service. So they are trained to understand the health and safety requirements for their service. We have one health and safety manager who has to spread himself very thinly over the whole organisation. So we have to make sure that the services take that responsibility, and under the health and safety legislation, that's set anyway. Because they're providing that, they have to make sure the health and safety is in place. Our role as the health and safety team within governance is to ensure there's support and training for them and additional advice from if they require it.
Okay, thank you. And I guess again the members are treated as members of the public, are they, in terms of the requirements?
Yes, so obviously when we have risk assessments, we do take into account any issues relating to committee meetings, members and your requirements. So for example, when we have a civic event, we have a risk assessment, a health and safety risk assessment for every event that we have to make sure that members are protected as well as staff and members of the public.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rowe, did you still have a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I suppose just sort of more of a point. I appreciate all the work that goes into this, and obviously it's very important, and that we get a list of, here are all the new items that have been added to it. I just wondered, from sort of a process perspective, do we sort of go back and review the old policies and decide if any of them need to be updated or sort of, I don't know, changed, got rid of, anything like that? It would just be interesting to see the size of, you know, sort of how much we're adding versus how much we're not necessarily taking away, but how much we're, you know, I don't know, improving or, you know, I don't know, changing or Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. With health and safety, there are a significant number of policies that come under the overall health and safety strategy. So what we bring to you is just the overall strategy about how we're managing health and safety. What we can do for the next reporting is bring you a list of the policies as well, and you can see where those changes have been made.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to understand, because I understand the Charter Hall has had new seating recently, and I've heard about some other issues with the seating. So I just wondered if there was what role health and safety have in terms of procurement of replacement items for our Charter Hall and other places we own.
So the health and safety team within governance doesn't have a procurement requirement, so you don't have to seek advice or guidance from governance for when you want to procure new items. However, you do have to do a risk assessment, and each service is responsible for that. So when they're looking at events in Charter Hall, they will do an assessment of what is required from those chairs, what's the most suitable type of chairs for the functions that they have, and they should build that into their spec. So they will have an element of that, and they will have an element of health and safety for any supplier as well. So in our procurement processes, there is an element for supplier health and safety.
Okay.
Just one more point, Chair. I'm just wondering if that might be something that could be addressed, because in the instance I've heard, it's that the children get their fingers trapped in the mechanism of the new seating, and that's happened. I was at an event last week where a number of children got their fingers trapped in the folding mechanism, for example, and it just seems to me ought to be something we're aware of when procuring is health and safety implications. And obviously we're seeing on that there's 2 instances, member of staff obviously expecting the old seats where they don't fold up, which I think is possibly a transition issue, but taking into consideration the issue for children.
With regards to the chairs, it's an item that we will talk to CCHL about in terms of the chairs that have been procured for Charter Hall and their appropriateness for their use. In terms of health and safety in general being involved in the procurement process, we are not resourced to have a view on every procurement that goes through. However, we do support where services ask us to review some of their plans. So we'll reinforce that with the committee going forwards.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any more questions? So we're happy to endorse the submission of the report to Cabinet and approve the health and safety policy for 2026. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Lee. Next item, I think it's you again, Hayley. The Risk Management Progress Report.
I'm so sorry. I promise it's the last one from me tonight, okay? And then you can have somebody nice to talk to you. So, every 6 months we bring you a report on health and safety. We bring you an annual report at the year end to give you a full overview, but we give you an update report during the year about how we're progressing with managing risk management. So set out before you is a summary of the work that's been undertaken between the period from April to December 25. We've also set out the current strategic risk register, and we've also included for the first time some reporting on the project risks. I know that's an item this committee has been very keen to see, and we've pulled some details together about those. So I'm just going to run through the work that's been undertaken during the period. The committee may recall some time ago, about a year or so ago, undertaking an exercise on risk appetite and actually looking at the risk appetite of the organisation. There was a questionnaire that you had to complete and a workshop to be attended to talk about appetites. That work has continued, so we had a final report on that has gone through to leadership during the year. And we've developed that work further with the heads of service, and we provided them with some advice and training on operational risk registers, because it's an area we know that we need to improve the reporting of operational risk from the services into the strategic risk register. So that's been ongoing, and I've been working with the management teams to develop their registers. As I say, the results of the risk appetite workshops have been implemented, and the appetite has been embedded into the risk management process, and I will go through that one in a moment when we look at the risk registers and explain how we've done that. We're looking also at developing a digital solution for managing risks, so I've been working with our IT team to develop a bit more of a robust process to make it hopefully easier for services to actually manage their risks and manage their risk registers. It'll also enable us to do a bit more of a dynamic reporting and visual reporting of the risks to yourselves going forwards. And following on from the last report to the committee in July, the risk management strategy that you approved has been agreed by Cabinet and full Council with that amendment, and we've updated the policy framework accordingly. So, looking at the strategic risk register at Appendix A, we have been through, or I have been through with board, the risk register. I went through the risk register in February with them, and some changes have been made to the risks. They've been set out in the report. There was 3 risks that were updated. As a result of that, what's actually happened is the key strategic risk for 26th of February 2026 is cyber and data security. Previously, you had 2 key risks. They both scored the same, and the previously LGR was the same score as cyber and data security. However, it's felt that the work that's been undertaken to prepare for hopefully the announcement that's coming out shortly means that we've reduced the residual risk of that. The initial risk is still high, but the residual risk hopefully is less than previously. So just looking at the risk register, what you may possibly have noticed is there is the addition of a column on the risk register for risk appetite. So the work that you undertook, setting the Council's risk appetite, resulted in a report that gave us an overall appetite for risk, which is set out at the top of the register. We've included that in every register that we have as a reminder of what we are prepared to accept. But it also set out individual appetites for the different areas of risk. Now, people who've been involved in risk for a little while will know that risk, especially in local authorities, is categorised using the term PESL, which stands for the different categories of risk: political, environmental, economic, social. I won't go into all of them because I can't remember them off the top of my head. So each of those areas has actually got its own risk appetite. And on page 343, I've set out a table for you, which hopefully makes sense in terms of there is the risk category and then the appetite by score. So those scores relate to the strategic risk register, and you can see where a risk is scored at, say, a level 9. So we'll go with the political risk, but if it's a level 9, it would actually be within our risk appetite. But once we get to 10 or 12, we're at the edge of our appetite. Then if it was scored at 15, it would exceed our appetite. So that gives us a better understanding and a quick snapshot when we look at our risks about where they sit within our appetite. Because you may have a high risk, but we are prepared to accept that. So it's within our tolerance. Because if you look at the table on 343, 2 of the risks we don't have as much tolerance for as others. So our technological risks and our environmental risks, we don't want to take as much risk with those. So our risk tolerance levels are lower. So that just sets out that clarification for you. And then with regards to the project risks, what we set out for you is 2 appendices. They are Part B items, so I can't go into great detail about the content of them, because they do contain sensitive security and commercial data because they relate to our projects. But we've set out our capital projects. We've also set out our transformation projects, which includes our digital ones. So this is an initial review of those risks. We are working on that and refining the risk reporting to you, and I'm aware that one of the comments that's already been made is about setting a financial parameter for those projects, so you can see what the financial impact of the project is, to get a sense of the scale and where they sit in terms of importance. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Dundas.
Thanks, Hayley. Very comprehensive, as usual. Actually, it certainly goes back to my previous question where I was talking about health and safety and across the whole organisation, and this is slightly perhaps going on to a later item. But who maintains the risk register for CCHL, and how does the risk appetite of the council filter down into that risk register for what CCHL is doing?
CCHL have their own risk register. They manage their own risk processes and they set their own risk parameters. However, Simon, who's the Managing Director of CCHL, sits on the Colchester City Council Senior Leadership Team. Therefore, all the work that we do relating to risk involves Simon as well. So he's fully aware of the levels that we accept as an organisation. We also use the shareholders group meetings to look at some of those issues and any risk concerns. But it is an area where we probably don't do sufficient reporting to give you assurances, and that's something we can look at as we do the CCHL reporting.
Okay, Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I don't think I've ever seen a risk register for CCHL, and it goes back to our earlier conversation, the earlier item of how Turnstone never ended up in a risk register. So, you know, I'm not going to mention specific projects, it's in the Part B, but where we have our project risk register, if it's a CCHL project, it doesn't appear on that and doesn't get scrutinised by any committee. So I'm just wondering if that's a bit of a weakness in governance there.
The scrutiny for their risks will go to their board first. So their primary reporting process is to their board. Once their board have agreed it, any further reports then can be produced to the council. And I think the leader already indicated he wants to comment on that.
Yeah, Councillor King.
I'm with you, and because the evidence of the past suggests this is how things can be missed, and there is a fundamental for me, which is why I've encouraged, and Simon's at the back and can hear this, encouraged the leadership of the City Council to have on it the leaders of CCHL and CBH. It's a family organisation, something, Paul, you and I think may have talked about even briefly this morning, that the sum of the performance is our strength, our weakness, and we've got to have an eye on the whole of it. So I personally would really support that. And Hayley, you and I have had a conversation too about whoever is the leader of the council at the time, have that, so there's an extra backstop in terms of oversight, because clearly this is a place in which awareness across the risk spectrum is also available. So I think we should just take that away and make sure we do reinforce that. So thank you, Paul, for bringing it up. It would be good sense in my view, especially at a time of change. You know, when we're coming up to the LGR, there'll be the sum of our contribution. All of the organisation needs to be fit for LGR. I know that it's working in that kind of spirit, but we will need, as we look forward a year or so, we will be looking specifically at how ready each of the three component parts of the organisation are for that. Well, transition, transformation, or trauma, you can have probably a mixture of all three. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Hayley, how are we picking the projects? Is that in terms of size or risk impact, strategic?
Yep, so in terms of the risks that we've reported to you at the moment, these are the key significant projects and the key significant risks as we see them at this point in time. As I say, this is our first draft of those. We are refining that process and we're looking at that project risk management process in a lot more detail as we go forward. So that's part of the key piece of work for 26-27 in terms of risk management, is developing a very robust project process that will bring you more information as we take it forward.
Okay, thank you. Have I got any other? I think Councillor Harris, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting report. Thank you, Hayley. I understand why the exceeds are on there. Obviously, you've got 2 or 3 exceeds on there, and that's important to recognise them and understand. But one I wanted to highlight was the at limit, the corporate assets. There are others who are not humble backbenchers like I am. I'm being very humble there, of course. Over the corporate, it says develop a corporate landlord model to enable better management of the assets, develop a comprehensive asset management plan. That seems to me quite a lot of work. And I wonder when the start date is, if it's already started, and when the name date is, because that seems quite important, especially when it mentions heritage and heritage risks within the text of the risk.
So in terms of the corporate assets, that work has already started. Our estates team are already reviewing those assets that we have, and there is a very detailed process going on at the moment in terms of looking at our heritage assets, including the town hall and the works that are required. And actually, it's one of those assessments of how much money do we want to invest in those assets, how much is required. It's a long process, as you say, in terms of identifying, using the surveys to understand what the issues are. And also we will be looking at the risk in terms of the surveys will only show us so much. Once work starts, that may be slightly different. But I don't think there's an end date at this point in time. I think we just need to understand at this point the extent of the works that are required.
Thank you. Have I got any other comments before we move on? No? Okay, thank you very much, Hayley. Thank you for your time this evening. It's 7:20. Are members up for a 10-minute break, at risk of upsetting Simon, who's looking to step forward, but it seems like a good time to, yeah, because I think we've got some questions. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back for 7:30 then. Thank you. Working again. Welcome back. We're moving on to item 8, which is the Amphora Growth and Finance Update 25-26. We've got Simon Coward here, and it's Alistair, isn't it? I seem to remember, but welcome if you want to give us an overview.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't have a presentation to provide today, but just a very brief summary of the documents that we've provided. We sought to provide you with a financial update for 25-26, also to provide a 5-year forecast, and to provide a growth strategy update. Obviously, we can go through the finances and any confidential questions in the closed session, but just to, I guess, give you a very brief summary, we're focused on, at the moment, 5 parts of the business. There are 3 core parts, which are Helpline, a significant amount of work in transitioning the Careline business from Tendering District Council into Helpline. So that has seen our customer base increase from about 2,500 to now well over 4,000 vulnerable customers. So that's a significant piece of work we've been working on, and that has seen, and Alistair can talk in a lot more detail about improvements in response times. The second is within the Amphora Connect part of the business, the fibre part of the business. So the town's funding work is completed. We continue with the Mersey Island work with the goal that we want to double the customer base over a number of years. So ambitious growth plans for Amphora Connect. And then Amphora Events, really building on a significant success in terms of the various events that have been run. And the new businesses around Amphora Space, so our work that we are doing with Holy Trinity Church and Amphora Grounds, where we hope to pick up the grounds maintenance contract, and a significant new focus for us. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do people want to move into closed session, or have they got comments they wish to make at this stage? Oh yeah, Councillor Dundon.
Yeah, I'll try and avoid going into any numbers. It goes back to really what I brought up in the last item agenda around risk and risk registers. I was very rude earlier about the tier report on Turnstone, but one thing it does highlight in there is it mentions CCHL, and it talks about, you know, financial figures and glossy plans and everything, but very little detail around risks, mitigations, alternative options and things. I don't want to go into confidential documents, but you've got assumptions of risks in there, and you have, particularly on the grounds maintenance contract, you have literally one short sentence in terms of the risks around it. It's quite a substantial amount of money. That seems to me to be a little light on the potential risks, and also around offering alternative decisions and options to the Cabinet. I'd expect to see something more like we've seen from Hayley in terms of actual options, and that's certainly what the recommendation is from the external auditors we should be seeing. And secondly, you mention LGR in there, but it's all rather positive. You don't mention the risk that a new council might not wish to continue with any of it, with any of CCHL, which is clearly a risk.
In terms of your questions on grounds maintenance, I'll pass over to Alistair, who'll give you more detail.
So firstly, I assure you that there is a very comprehensive risk register for grounds maintenance and the risks it holds for Amphora. And I think, as Hayley talked about earlier, we had a meeting today,
look at catastrophic events and what that means for the council and Amphora in relation to grounds maintenance being brought back in-house. So it's been very thoroughly reviewed and to the degree of, you say, going to catastrophe of in taking it back.
Just to add to that, so we propose to bring to G&A committee, as was mentioned previously, a full business plan around grounds maintenance, and that will include a risk register. So apologies that for the lightness of the growth strategy, there will be a full business plan and risk register which we can bring to this G&A committee. In regard to LGR, again, this growth strategy was light. It was just giving you an update. The report does, there are lots of challenges behind LGR in merging, for example, Careline with Helpline. The Helpline, both teams have been outstanding in their commitment to maintain service. But yes, there have been challenges in bringing those two together. But I would say that the work we've been doing with tendering has shown a real collaborative approach. So it has been really positive and really constructive. And we would, really applaud that tendering's approach to work with us to find solutions to maintain services. So it has been good, but we will ensure very thorough registers as we keep, as Hayley has raised. Thank you.
Councillor Dundee.
Thanks for that. That's reassuring. I mean, obviously, with LGR, it's a lot more than tendering. Others may have different views. Who knows? Just to be clear on the decision we're being asked to make, are we recommending that this goes to Cabinet with any comments, or it's saying to review and make recommendations to Cabinet on the M4 growth and updates, finance update? I would like to propose that if we're making a recommendation to Cabinet on this, that we recommend that the risk register and mitigations regarding the grounds maintenance contract are included in the Cabinet report. So I think Cabinet will need to see them before they make any decisions.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think that's... Councillor King, have you got anything to...
Thank you. And thank you, Paul, for, as ever, for the observations, and Simon and Alistair for the response. Just a couple of things, or perhaps three. It's not for me to write your recommendations. We're thoughtful about this, but I always value hearing the conversation here. It's different to seeing it in paper. The first is just a reminder, as Chris reminded me, I remind us that because we've made that decision recently, it's subject to full council, that we're going to, inside a refreshed, and this is very much, I think, from my perspective, it was an auditable and risk-aware process. So tying everything up, including delegations and the relationships back to the family of organisations between CCHL and CCC. Enough room to operate, enough scope to use that commercial acumen which we value, and the great stuff, let's just say that you've set out here somehow, in which this committee before has applauded, and in my view rightly, you've gained, I would offer the view that you've gained collectively our confidence, and we can go back 2 or 3 years and that was not the case. It's been a long climb, and we're in a much better place. Got to keep there. So just a reminder for us all, the way we're going to work forward, full council agrees, is to bring everything that matters here before it hops on to Cabinet and to the portfolio holder, which the leader of the council, whoever that person will be, is the one. So that combination should give both some freedom to operate and also a structure within which risk and challenge can rightly be given in the right, rounded way. The other thing I want to say, because I think it addresses two things: relationship, strategic risk, and more local risk. Although, Paul, I'm not, it's up to you. I understand the point you make, it's fair. It's just LGR. Can I just talk to that for a bit? Every bit of business that comes to CCHL to Amphora will, of course, have the usual commercial boundaries. So in there will be opportunity to take profit, provide a service, as you would if in the usual way these things are fully commercial company as opposed to a council-owned entity, which will have one eye on other factors than just profit, but profit is part of the equation. the way we're working, and Paul, you've been able to be there, thank you, some of the time in some of those conversations across North East Essex, but for other members, the way that we're working is very much is to map out, away from the theatre of when we come together, how we're going to work. And it's plain, and Helpline demonstrates this, doors are opening to Amphora because of the quality of what you do and the confidence others are gaining. And I think it's important that this committee gets some sort of sense of that. What we could continue to do is extend that beyond tendering in Braintree and beyond, if depending on our future. But it doesn't have to stop there. A successful company that can provide services that are justified in their own rights. Events at one level that's really commercial and has its own innate social value, and Helpline and its equivalents, where the National Health Service, with whom we'll be working even more closely than before if things go as we expect, they have a bottom line benefit. So I think we can take some assurance from that. There is a solidity, is what I'm saying, to what Amphora can do in terms of LGR readiness and preparation. But, Paul, if I can, I'll just say, but of course it's still fair that you have to allow for the possibility that what's going smoothly now may run a cropper with different relationships and different people in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't saying that is going to happen. No. I was saying that it is a risk because we might all be in agreement now, and I agree that there is potential. It is both a risk and an opportunity. That it could be at either end of the scale. It could be some really good opportunities, or there could be some really difficult risks. So I just think that in the business plan, in terms of listing potential risks ahead, it has to be acknowledged that LGR, there's two sides to the coin, that's all.
Yes, Simon, did you want to respond?
Yeah, just to add to that comment, Chair. So in terms of the 5-year forecast that you've been presented with, it is prudent, and there are assumptions that contracts will not continue post LGR. So we're being prudent in not assuming that we will continue with contracts. So there is a prudence there. Thank you.
Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad of that, because that was one of my questions there. So, on a separate theme now, I've been on this council a long while, over 20 years now, and this council, the officers of the council certainly know over the years of the financial services reviews that we've done over the years, where we've had to make cuts since the 2008 crash. We've had to be a much leaner, meaner type of council with less staff and less to do. What assurances can you give us, Simon, about that your organisation under your umbrella will be as lean, as mean as the Colchester City Council has, and that you don't price yourself out of the market? I'm thinking about the future. The future could be bright, I think, and I believe it can be with the contracts you've got. It's just that if we're not careful, we get too many staff, too much backroom expenses on there. We may risk that, and I don't want to risk all of that for some good stuff. So the question is really about Colchester Council as opposed to Amphora.
Thank you for the question. So I can probably share some more in closed session, but to give you some reassurance. So the whole culture of Amphora is to be commercial and to be lean, and the staff that we employ bring those skills to bear. So we are running a cost down programme that has continued for a number of years, and I'm continuing it as we go forward. So there's probably 3-4 phases to that, and the total savings will come to about £400,000. So there is an absolute focus on keeping costs down. That is within an environment where costs are rising, and so that is helping us to maintain a lean approach in terms of our finances, and that transposes through to our staff. So we're keeping a very lean number and teams of staff, and where we do see staff go, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll replace them. We're always looking at how do we need to shape the business to prepare for the future.
Okay, thank you. Members looking to go into closed session, they've got further questions to ask. Yeah. Okay, do we want to do item 9 first, the work programme? So if we just quickly look at that and then we'll close and move on. So the work programme, setting up the work programme for 25-26, which is obviously coming to a close. So Matthew, is there anything you want to update us on?
There isn't, Chair, really. This is the last meeting of the municipal year, and the work programme is as written. If any members of the committee have comments or questions or suggestions, be happy to receive them. Thank you.
Nothing? Ready to move on? Just so that I can formally recall before we close down, I just wanted to thank Matthew for your good governance over the last year and for keeping the work programme sorted, committee members cited and me in order as a relatively new chair. If I can also thank senior officers and portfolio holders, I think we've had a really good attendance during the year. Some really good, they've spent time, we've had a lot of detail in face of quite comprehensive challenge from members. To me, it feels like we've made quite a good step forward during the year, and just to committee members, to thank them for their good attendance and being meticulous in preparation. I think we always come with questions and challenge, and for their attention during meetings. So thank you very much. If I can move in accordance with section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, I move to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that any items containing exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, financial business affairs of a particular person, including the authority holding information, can be considered. Exempt information is defined in section 101 and schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972.